Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is the Ryan Griffin Show with Ryan Griffin. I am, of course, your host, Ryan Griffin. And what we got for you today is really, what else are we going to talk about, right? It's the college football playoff. And we're going to talk about how, borderline thesis statement, here's your headline grabber, Michigan should be number one in the college football playoff when it comes out on Tuesday. I'm not happy about it. I'm a Spartan fan, so you know that I'm not happy about it, but it's what should happen. You know, Michigan demolished two teams in the top 10 with Penn State and Ohio State, and I don't think Penn State is any fucking good, but they went into Ohio State, who still might be a playoff team. They went into Columbus, and they absolutely wrecked the Buckeyes. And I actually do think that Georgia is a better team than what Michigan is right now. So before you get on me and get on my case and say, hey, Georgia is this and Georgia is that, and Georgia whooped Michigan's ass in the college football playoff last year, I get you, I hear you, I feel you. But reality is Georgia does not deserve to be number one when the CFP ranking comes out. And I don't think it really matters where they get ranked, to be honest with you. We'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. But if you look at Michigan's schedule, right? Michigan got clowned for their out-of-conference because it was abysmal. But if you look at just what Michigan did in conference, again, man, they beat Penn State by 1 million. They went to Columbus and beat Ohio State, who, this is very important, you got to keep in mind, the committee will certainly have Ohio State top 6. They just will. So if you're going to say, here's a top 6 team that Michigan just beat by 100 on their home turf, then I don't see how you don't give the edge to Michigan, especially when you look at the way the season has gone, is Michigan's win came at the very end of the year, and this is, of course, assuming both win their championship games. I'll give you, Georgia has a way tougher task in their championship game versus LSU than Michigan does with Purdue, but LSU might be the best win Georgia has all year, and if Georgia ends up beating LSU, then LSU is going to have 3 losses, and it's really not going to look as impressive as it should. Because right now, Georgia's most impressive win is their Week 1 win. You know, they beat Oregon 49-3, which is an absolute shellacking, and I don't think it should be forgotten, but it was also 3 months ago. And you're just looking at how these teams are trending, right? Other than that, Georgia really hasn't beaten anybody. You know, they beat a bad South Carolina team by a lot. They beat Tennessee, and if Tennessee is the best team that Georgia has beaten, you're looking at that and you're going, okay, well, in your memory, because your memory should be correct, is Georgia controlled the game and they kind of blew the doors off of Tennessee. And you would be correct, except for the fact that you wouldn't be, right? Because if you look at the final score, if you're just going to box score watch, Georgia only won that game by 2 touchdowns. And if you're saying, oh, they only won by 2 touchdowns is a lot, I understand that, 27-13 Georgia victory. But you're going to compare that to what Michigan did against Penn State or what Michigan did against Ohio State, and they won both those games by at least 3 touchdowns. So then you just start looking at what else has happened throughout the year. And I do think the SEC is a better conference than the Big Ten, but Georgia didn't have to face the second best team in the SEC. I still think the second best team in the SEC is Alabama. I know Tennessee beat them very late in the game, and then Georgia ended up beating Tennessee, and I do think Georgia would beat Alabama, but Michigan had to play the second and third best teams in their own conference, and they blew them both out, blew the doors off of them, and did it with, a statement, obviously. Georgia, defending national champions. So that argument, I actually don't think is all that terrible of a one, is they won last year, they should be number one until proven otherwise. If you're going to stick with that argument, though, then you should have thought that Michigan should be ranked above Ohio State all year. And I bet that's not what you thought, because last year Michigan beat Ohio State. Last year Michigan won the Big Ten, and last year Michigan made the college football playoff before they ended up getting kind of their brains beaten in by Georgia. With all that considered, though, I do think Michigan should be number one based on resume I do think Georgia will end up being a better team, and if things play out how we think they're going to play out, with USC winning the Pac-12 and TCU winning the Big 12, and we get a college football playoff of those four teams, right? Georgia will be 1, Michigan will be 2, 3 and 4 is going to be swapped between TCU and USC. If I am either Michigan or Georgia, I would much rather see TCU in the first round, but that's just me. And I think TCU would be, not, of course not that TCU is a bad team. They've had a fantastic year. But if you're Georgia, TCU should be an automatic win. If you're Michigan, TCU should be an automatic win. I can't say that about USC, but I think the smart money, or at least the public money, right, what most people would suspect is that the college football national championship is going to come down to Michigan and Georgia. Those are certainly going to be 1 and 2 in the college football playoff in this ranking, and I don't see either of them losing their conference title game. So we have that set, right? I think Michigan should be 1. I do think Georgia should be 2, but they'll be able to settle it on the field, and that's going to transition into our second point here. This is mainly for Michigan fans, because some of these other schools that have reached these heights, it doesn't seem like they have the same problem. Michigan fans, I need you to act like you belong at this table. You guys beat Ohio State last year. I don't know if you thought it was a fluke, because all week Michigan fans had spent not understanding. I won't say not understanding, because they knew that if they beat Ohio State, they're basically guaranteed a spot into the playoff, because of course they're not going to lose to Purdue or whoever was going to come at the Big Ten, out of the Big Ten West. It wasn't guaranteed to be Purdue at the time, but Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, whoever, right? Michigan was just going to run through them. They were making excuses and trying to come up with scenarios on, okay, if we lose to Ohio State, how can we get in? It's not what you should be thinking about now. Now that Michigan has 2 wins against Ohio State, both in dominating fashion. You beat them by more points this year than you did last year, right? Last year it was 42 to 27, and this year you're looking at 45 to 23. So Michigan has dominated Ohio State 2 years. It's Michigan's conference now. Michigan needs to act like they are the king of the hill. They need to act like that superiority complex that everybody has always accused Michigan of having, but now they've spent this entire week saying, well, if we lose to Ohio State, we still deserve to be in over TCU, or we deserve to be in over USC, LSU, Alabama, whoever it is, right? And that's just a mindset that you need to get out of, because you are the second, favorite to win the national championship if you're going to look at odds. And you are a team that, you have obviously one of the best coaches in the country. I know he's a guy who almost left for the NFL, not even 12 months ago. And not even 24 months ago, he's the guy that Michigan fans wanted to fire. But time moves fast in college football. And to Ohio State fans, this might be a shock to you. Even to Michigan fans, it might be a shock to you. Again, I'm a fan of Michigan State. I'm not going to sit here and try to hide it or try to act like I'm anything different. It pains me to say this, but Michigan runs the Big Ten now. I'm sure Ohio State fans are mad. Michigan hasn't won a title since 1997. That's fine. Your last title was in 2014. Bro, 2014 was freaking, 8-9 years ago. That's a long time in college football. You got 2 whole recruiting classes. You got people who weren't even on either team's staff the last time that that Ohio State won the national title 8 years ago. It's not relevant. You look at Cam Newton's title at Auburn. That was 2010, 2011. So they're only 3 or 4 years behind you. And that feels like forever ago. So I think if you're Michigan and you're a Michigan fan, you really got to switch your mindset. This is your time. You are the Big Ten champions. Of course, you deserve to be the Big Ten champions, but now it has to come from the mindset of we expect to win the Big Ten. Ohio State expected to win the Big Ten for 15 years, and for the most part, they did it. You sprinkled in Wisconsin every now and then. You sprinkled in Michigan State for a couple years there. You sprinkled in Penn State once or twice. But now, if you're Michigan, you should expect to win the conference. every single year. Does that mean you're going to? Of course not. But you have to change that mindset of, oh, if we lose to Ohio State and we're 11-1, then how can we get into the playoff? It can't be that. It has to be, we're going to go into Ohio State with the understanding that if we win, then we're in, and we expect to win this game. Because, I mean, let's be honest, Michigan will go to Ohio State most years with that one loss in the conference and still be very much in play for the Big Ten title. You know, I know Matt Rule just got hired at Nebraska and Luke Fickell just got hired at Wisconsin. Both those teams are in the Big Ten West. So, one, it's going to take them a while to get going. Two, Michigan doesn't play each of those teams every single year. Three, once they get going, Michigan should still beat those teams just based on the talent they'll have. It will be a tougher win than what Nebraska is now because Nebraska's not very good. It will be a tougher win than what Wisconsin is now because Wisconsin is not very good. But any of the new hires, any of the new things kind of shifting throughout the Big Ten, I know the transfer portal is about to go crazy with guys, switching teams and flipping all over. Michigan has to expect to win the conference. Michigan has to start acting like they're the kings of this conference because they've deep pantsed Ohio State for 2 years now. I don't know that Ohio State's certainly never going to go away, but for right now, it's probably too far to say Michigan, quote unquote, owns the rivalry, because I do think owning a rivalry means just like a sustained period of dominance over the other team, but they've certainly flipped it, where now Ohio State doesn't own it. Now Ohio State can't go in. And Ryan Day is making those cute comments about, okay, well, I hope the Big Ten has a mercy rule because we're about to drop 100 on them. There is no more dropping 100 on Michigan. And I guarantee if Michigan won 2 games previous to when Ryan Day took over and when he made that comment, I think it was after the first year that he beat Michigan, was in the COVID year when Michigan ducked Ohio State, Ryan Day wouldn't have said that if Michigan had won 2 of the last 3 Ohio State, or even if Michigan had gotten 1 win against Urban Meyer. Those aren't the kind of comments that Ryan Day would have been making, but Ryan Day and Ohio State, as an extension, got arrogant about their success over Michigan. They probably looked at last year as a fluke. There's fans that even look at this year as a fluke, and you can argue why. I think it's more of the fringe fans that think, hey, we were still the better team. But if you are Michigan, you have to take this and you just have to run with it. As my cat runs across the screen here, it's a great parallel. You need to run with the fact that you guys are just the kings of the Big Ten, and that's how it is going to be until somebody beats you, right? As Ric Flair said, in order to be the man, you have to beat the man, and right now the man resides in Ann Arbor, and his name is Jim Harbaugh. That is what we have. Michigan fans, I guess, act like it, right? You guys have a great shot to not only win a national title, but you're at least 75% to go to it. Even if you draw USC, which would kind of be the worst case scenario in that first round, you of course rather have TCU, but Michigan's in a great spot to get to a national title game, and again, I think you should be number 1. I'm sure there's probably a lot of you that think you should be number 1 as well. You should have all the confidence in the world that you could beat Georgia. It's not going to be an easy task, but this is not the Georgia team that whooped your ass last year, and you are not the same Michigan team. I think you guys are better. I think Georgia is worse, and if you meet in the title game, that is a challenge that I think Michigan fans should welcome. This is the Ryan Griffin Show with Ryan Griffin. I am, of course, Ryan Griffin. As always, go green, as much as all of that pained me to say. And good night. I'll see you guys, it's sometime later. Peace.